Hi everyone, I'm Novuyo Tshuma. I'm a visiting faculty member at the Iowa Writers Workshop for the spring semester 2020. I'm also a former student of the workshop, so I've spent a couple of years here, and it's great to be talking to you today.
And my name is Garth Greenwell. I'm also visiting faculty in fiction this semester, and like Novuyo, I graduated from the workshop in 2015. So we're here today because we get a lot of questions about the admissions process. Novuyo and I both served on the faculty admissions committee, which means that we were involved in reading the submissions of finalists. And we thought that we'd take this opportunity to answer some of the common questions we get about the process of applying to the Iowa Writers Workshop.
Oh, so what did you submit with your application when you applied to the workshop, Garth?
So I actually submitted the first section of what would become my first novel, What Belongs to You. So it was like a self-contained single piece of fiction that was actually on the long side, probably longer than I would advise myself now to submit. It was about 80 pages. What about you?
Gosh, yeah. I remember reading What Belongs to You in workshop, and it just was one of the most amazing pieces I'd ever read. I submitted an excerpt from my novella Shadows, which is published in my first collection in South Africa. So I chose that because it was my more polished piece. I had a draft of my novel House of Stone, which I wrote whilst at the workshop, but it was a very, very rough draft. And I think I'd really completed that first draft a few days before I was due to submit, so I wasn't really confident about it. So I wanted to submit a work I'd spent more time with, more time thinking about and polishing, and just revisiting. Yeah. And I think I was on the shorter side. I don't think I submitted a long manuscript, but I was really trying to go for a contained piece, a piece that could stand on its own and have a nice flow and sort of showcase my best writing, as it were, at the time.
Yeah, great. Do you read genre fiction, sci-fi, fantasy, horror, differently than realist fiction?
You know what, I read everything. So what I'm really interested in is the quality, right? It's the sense of, does the work grab me? Does it interest me? Does it capture my attention? And I think that's just a facility of good writing rather than any specific genre. And we've had different sort of types of writing, even here at the workshop. I remember Bennett Sims, who was a professor and a former workshop student, wrote this lovely zombie literary novel, right? A questionable shape. Yeah. And I remember reading that when I was here, and I just couldn't stop. I'm like, this is fascinating.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think when I'm reading whatever the genre is, you know, I'm asking myself about character, I'm asking myself about place, and then maybe more than anything else, I'm asking myself about the quality of the sentences. And you know, sometimes I feel like people talk about sort of an Iowa aesthetic or an Iowa story or an Iowa novel, but that's just not my experience. I mean, people here are writing fiction all over the map. And when I was a student, we had sci-fi novels, we had fantasy novels. I don't think actually, like, genre is not, and certainly when I'm reading applications, like, genre has nothing to do with whether it seems to me that a student could contribute at the Iowa Writers Workshop or not.
Yes. I think that's one of the joys of being here. I think we're just writers writing, and that's the main thing, and we both bring what comes from within. And of course, as eclectic people, there are various works. So I have also encountered this idea of the Iowa model, which I've then had to laugh at because it felt very ridiculous. The stuff of myth, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, I don't think there is a single Iowa aesthetic.
Yeah. So I'd encourage writers to actually just submit their best work, what speaks to them, and to be confident in submitting whatever work. I think one of the greatest mistakes when you see this anxiety is writers trying to figure out what type of work does a place like Iowa accept and what can I write? Yeah. And that's mistake number one, and that's most likely guaranteed not to get you a place here.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, the idea of sort of trying to be strategic and appeal to an Iowa aesthetic. I mean, the committee is different every year, and you can't anticipate even who's going to be on the faculty committee because you and I are both visitors. So next year we won't be on this committee. So people should write the work that they feel best represents them and that they're most urgently invested in. Yeah, absolutely.
So Garth, how would you describe the things you look for when you're reading a manuscript?
Yeah, I mean, I do think, so I think it's important on the committee that people have varying priorities. I don't think we all look for the same thing, you know, or have the same sort of priorities of things we're looking for. I am someone, I want to feel that a writer is doing something interesting with sentences. And that doesn't mean a single thing, but I'm interested in a voice that's doing something that feels to me, actually, I'm compelled by voices that are maybe a little eccentric, maybe a little strange, maybe a little, you know, not the kind of center of the road sort of typical realist novel. Like that, I mean, I think that was sort of the value I could contribute on the admissions committee, was sort of, I'm fascinated by what sentences can do. And so I'm really, then second, I mean, I want, after the quality of the writing, I think for me it's probably character, you know? Like I want to feel that characters are acting in ways that feel human to me, you know? Yeah, those are probably my top priorities. And then also for me, a sense of place, you know? I mean, it's hard for me to connect to a piece of writing if I feel like it's happening in a void. So yeah, those are probably my priorities. What about you? What are your priorities?
You know, I'm very much interested in story. For me, it's a sense of, can I follow the story? Has it captivated me? Has it captured me? And that's a very sort of elusive thing, because different pieces actually do different things, but you know it when you see it. And in that sense, you know, as people who read a lot generally in life, I'm also interested in seeing work that's daring. And that doesn't have to be in any loud way, just work that's trying to push, or you think of it as the author's sensibility, right? A way of looking at the world. And again, that is something that you can see as you read. So I'm really not interested in work that tries to replicate what's been done before. And that's at the facility maybe of cliche and sort of the terms that are being used. As you know, every story has been written and it's being rewritten. So for me, it's that facility that a work brings. And I think you see it also at the level of, for me, I'm not so much interested in a work that comes extremely polished, but also that shows that facility for growth, right? That shows a sense of care. And I think you see that as well at the level of the sentence. Style, very much voice as well. And it's interesting because this is sort of a baseline for reading, and then you read a work from, say, Zimbabwe, Nigeria, a work set in California, very different styles, but they also have that sort of very same, that facility for, say, story and voice that captures in different ways.
Yeah, I think that's so important. You know, and what you say about like a sensibility, like I want to feel, I mean, we read as a way of encountering another mind, right? And so, I mean, the most important thing is probably just that mind be interesting, that mind feel like it has something urgent to communicate to me. And then it can do that in any sort of way. But that idea that, I mean, I want to feel that I'm writing something that only this, that I'm reading something that only this writer could write. And that, I mean, that's then the sort of excitement. And also what you say about, like, polish is kind of the least important thing for me. Like, a manuscript can be quite rough if there are moments that are really exciting. You know, I do, when I'm reading applications, like, I'm looking for the peaks. I'm not so concerned about the deficiencies. I mean, this is a program where people come to learn. Like, I don't expect them to come with publishable work. But I'm interested in the moments of real excitement. Yeah. So if there is one piece of, is there one piece of advice you'd give to applicants who are trying to decide what to submit?
I think it's also important, and just as a matter of self-respect as an artist, and to respect the people reading your work, to send in work that at least you've spent some time with. I think it's a bit dangerous to write a piece, you know, today and decide you just send it tomorrow, right? So at a basic level, to check that spelling, language, formatting, those basic precepts of presentation are in place, but then as well that you have actually given the piece your best effort, and that's something that takes a bit of time. If you have a friend can read the work if you'd like. But that's also because, you know, this being a top program, I think 3% acceptance rate, it is difficult to get in. So you really want to present your best face. You don't get another chance, right, unless you reapply to show what you're capable of. So I think it's very important just to situate yourself mentally as you prepare, to think about your goals as a writer, what type of writing you yourself would like to present, how you'd like to be read, and work towards that. I think one of the things that's difficult, I think, is taking writing seriously at that level as something that requires labor and a bit of effort. So of course, it's not that we're looking for ready-made writers, but you can actually tell when you read a manuscript. I think works where the author has put effort, and then works that feel very rough, as if it's been afterthought.
Yeah.
Yes. And what about you?
So I actually, I think the advice that I would give an applicant, having served on the committee now, is to not do what I did when I applied, which I submitted one long piece of writing. I actually found reading the manuscripts that having 80 pages was not better than having 20 pages.
Yes.
Yes. And that if a piece hadn't convinced me 20 pages in, almost never did it convince me at page 60. But there were submissions that had multiple pieces. And I found in several applications that the first story didn't seem to me super exciting, but then the second story did. So I would tell applicants, and I would tell myself, to submit, that the important thing is to submit work that demonstrates your range. And so I would say, rather than a single 80-page submission, I would submit 2 20-page stories that showed, different approaches you take to writing.
Yeah. That's brilliant advice. And I also had the same thing. For me, length does not denote quality. Length for me did not affect whether or not I accepted or liked a piece. It was the quality. And I think it's true with long pieces, it's the detriment. I rarely would I be convinced if I'm 20 pages in that something can happen to change my mind. Yeah. And it's also facility of whatever errors are there in those first 20 pages. I would say it's a bit difficult with the long piece, because there were some pieces that there was one piece I read I was really on the fence about, because I could see its talent, but the more I read, the more it seemed to fall apart. Huh. And that could perhaps speak to sometimes just one long piece can become detrimental.
Yeah, I think that's true. So Novuyo, what has made Iowa City the place to study creative writing?
And here I'm paraphrasing Ethan Kanan, who's one of the faculty members. He said something when I was here, I was like, yes, this is true. He said, this is the place where writers are kings and queens.
What did he mean by that?
I thought that I'm a queen as a writer here. For me, Iowa City, it's, first of all, there's the quiet. There's the sense of quiet. But this is, for me, a city of artists and writers. The greatest thing here for me is the community that you find outside of the workshop. I love that this place doesn't have that professionalized feel that would make it feel as though we only meet when we come to workshop and then we all scatter and have our own various lives. So a lot of the writing and conversations happen outside of the workshop. For me, it's those relationships at late night parties, late night conversations, at George's, at the Foxhead, where writers get to sit and really break apart, right? What it is that writing is about, what matters to them in their work. And when those friendships are formed, at least for me, we formed our friendship here, which is one great example of the sort of success of being here in Iowa City. And that for me has facilitated something I haven't been able to find anywhere in my sort of travels. So I think it's an atmosphere that's quite difficult to put together. Because again, I think writers, we are a difficult species, and this is not to fetishize us. So having us in a space where we're able to share our vulnerabilities, our joys and disappointments, and have that actually be the pulse of a place is something that makes this place very, very original and very beautiful. And you know it when you're here, basically. And what about you?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, the friendships I made here that I've carried away, I can't believe that I got to be in workshop with you and with Jamel Brinkley and with Fatma Farheen Mirza and with David Wiston Owen, and it's just extraordinary to me this group of writers. Like, never again in my life will I have the chance to spend 2 years in the company of such writers. For me, the thing that distinguishes Iowa City is actually, you know, so, I mean, the Iowa Writers Workshop is the flagship program of the university. It's the oldest program. It's why Iowa City is this weird, seemingly random center of American literature. But there's this constellation of writing programs, and actually that's what makes Iowa City unique to me. It's not just that there's the Writers Workshop where we hang out as fiction writers and poets. There's the nonfiction workshop. There's the playwrights workshop. There's the Spanish creative writing MFA, which those writers are extraordinary. And I mean, that's been a big part of my life in Iowa City. And I'm so excited by the writers in that program. There's the international writing program that brings in, what, 25 writers from around the world every fall. And we hang out, you know, we go to Georgia's with those writers. And that, to me, that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. Like, that is, you know, the richness of Iowa City is what happens when people from all of these different places, people working in multiple genres, people working in multiple languages, come together and talk about what it means to make art. And that, to me, is really the distinguishing feature. Yes, it's the Iowa Writers Workshop, but also it's the fact that as students in the Writers Workshop, we get to interact with writers doing very different things.
That's so beautiful. And as you were talking, I was thinking of my time here and how the luxury of writing time, something that you can take for granted when you're here, but when you leave, you actually get to understand what it means. And that for me was also one of the most important things here, in addition to this sort of eclectic community. That sense, and it's not just writing time, but just for me and my work here, I felt like my work bloomed here, especially because I felt understood as a writer, or also vulnerable enough, as well as grounded enough to explore who I was as a writer. And that's a very important aspect of the writing process. And so for me, that idea of being seen and understood as a writer before you feel you yourself have bloomed as a writer, again, is a very delicate sort of balancing act, which seems to, it works really well here.
And you know, that is a real gift of the program. I would also say, like, to people considering applying to the program, that it's one thing they should think about whether this program is the best match for them. We have a lot of time in this program. You know, and I think you know, that was really important to me. It was important to you.
Very important to me.
But I do think, you know, if a young writer asked me about where they should apply, and they said, I need a lot of structure, you know, I need people sort of telling me what to do with my time, then Iowa's not the place, you know? And I think it is, one of the unique things about the program is that it is this kind of almost halfway ground between an academic program and an arts residency. And I think, you know, you do need a certain amount of maturity, not just as a writer, but also as a person who can manage your time, you know, that's important when you think about which program is the best match.
That is so brilliant. And I will tell you with pride, I applied to a couple of programs, and Iowa was the only program I got into.
Wow.
And
wow,
I say that
amazing.
because it's a unique program, and it seemed like it understood me before I understood myself. So I take that as a sort of source of pride.
Absolutely. You know, Iowa was the only program I applied to because I was feeling very, very ambivalent about returning to graduate school. I was living in Europe. I didn't want to come back to the United States. I was feeling very ambivalent. I had also had an experience before in a PhD program, an English program, going to a top-ranked program and arriving and feeling like, wow, like this doesn't live up to the hype. And so when I came to Iowa, I know, I mean, there was a kind of cynicism. Like, I was expecting to sort of feel like, oh, this is not all it's, and then that first workshop we had, the novel workshop, where I was reading you and Fatma and David Owen. And I just remember each week reading these books and thinking, these are writers I will read for the rest of my life. And that is a thrilling experience. Like just to be able every week to sit in a room with writers whose work you know is going to accompany you your whole career, and that you get to talk to them and they read your work and you get to be friends. That's a pretty thrilling thing.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.